Space Marine captains are the exemplars of what a Space Marine should be. They're leaders and most powerful warriors, often becoming chapter masters should their previous chapter master disappear. Hello everybody, my name is Spins Rattling, and today we're doing a top 10 video on top 10 Space Marine captain minis. First up, we have the Dark Angels Company Master. This guy was released on the 24th of March of 2007. He released first in metal and later in fine cast. He was sculpted by Seb Purbett, and of course this model is pretty iconic to the Dark Angels. From the sort of Middle Ages of 40k, if you will, I think this model holds up quite well. His enormous cloak is just very, very cool and adds a unique part to his silhouette, and the fact that it has the sculpted iconography on it is very cool. And bonus points, he does have a very large back banner, which makes him look extra imposing, along with that classic sort of flared tipped sword, which is, I think, pretty cool, in my opinion. I also like this kind of helmet with the arches of feathers around its side, and it's something I hope that comes back to the Dark Angels, as we haven't seen it in quite some time. We're going to move on to number 9 now. Now, number 9 is a fan-favorite Space Marine, and that is, of course, going to be Tiberius the Red Wake, Chapter Master of the Carcharodons. This guy was released in 2011 in Forge World Resin. Fortunately, I couldn't find the exact date or who sculpted him, because this guy just didn't appear to show up in any of the White Dwarfs. Of course, this model is, just in general, pretty cool, but I mainly brought it here because of how unique he is, not only with his dual Chain Fist Lightning Claw combo, but also his armor is sort of a cool fusion between Indomitus pattern, Power Armor, and Mark V Heresy armor. And it's one of the few examples of Mark V Heresy I quite like. I also think his pose is nice and aggressive, if nothing super ecstatic. That is why he is this low down on the list. I would like to see Tiberius get a new model. Just because, of course, this one is no longer for sale, and I think he could be done maybe a little bit more justice if they just gave him more aggressive pose and, of course, made him bigger, as this guy is pretty diminutive at this point. We're going to move on to number 8 now. Number 8 is a throwback to the 90s with the Games Day Captain released in 1999 in metal. This guy was, of course, a limited edition miniature, and for his age, I think he is exceptional. He really sticks in my mind as not only a great-looking model, the pose is quite solid, I like the way they sculpted the cape, I also like his bolter with the scope on top, and he does have a back banner. Here we can see him painted up in the Crimson's Fists livery, which is something that will show up again later. I just think that this model, for the era he came out in, is very, very good, and he's a model that I would very much like to own, though I do want to note, finding him is quite difficult. Of course, getting the exact release date, I also couldn't get it for this guy, because really I only have this image to go off of. And I don't believe this guy would have been in a White Dwarf from the era, even if I had access to those White Dwarfs, which they don't appear to be in the Warhammer Vault yet, so we'll have to wait and see if they ever do, but this model is really good for his age. Next up, we have another Crimson Fist, a classic Warhammer character, Pedro Kantor. This guy came out in 2007, specifically October 18th. He was sculpted by the absolutely legendary sculptor Juan Diaz, who also did the Metal Demonettes. He did the 2002 Demon Prince, among many others. He's truly a great sculptor, and his work comes through here great with Pedro. His pose is very nice. I quite like his loadout in general, with the wrist-mounted bolter and the large power fist, along with the back banner. He just feels very, very proper for what Pedro Kantor should be. He was, of course, first released in metal, and later fine cast when that came out a few years later. And even though this model is really, really good, it is one I would like to see get an update, because I'd just like him to stand tall among his brethren again, because Pedro Kantor is a certified badass, to put it lightly. Definitely one of the coolest Space Marines to ever do it in the history of Warhammer. We're going to move on to number 6, which is actually going to be our one and only double feature. This is both of the versions of Captain Centos, the one released in 2016 and 1999. The one released in 1999 was metal, and the one released in 2016 was unfortunately fine cast. I actually just got that 2016 model, and I want to paint him for a video. If you have any suggestions for chapters, leave them down in the comments, and I'll consider it. I just really like this pose in this mini in general. He's been reimagined a few times. There is one more version of him. But I really like the bolter with the stock on it. I think the pose is very, very cool. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but there's something about it that just feels very right. Like he's about to call the troops into a huge charge as he lets loose a flurry of bolt shells from that bolter that he is one-handing because he is cool. Yeah, overall, both these models are great for the time they came out in. And I would love to own the metal one at some point, though he will probably be a little harder to find than the fine cast version released in 2016. Moving on to number 5, we have another fan favorite Space Marine, I'd say. We have Asterian Moloch of the Minotaurs. This could be one dude or many dudes, depending on who you ask, and this guy's just really wonderfully sculpted. He has the right level of sort of fancifulness that I like to see for chapter masters, who really should have all the hallmarks of a given chapter's design, and of course, Asterian here definitely does. I love the unique helmet. The big storm shield and power spear is a really cool loadout. The pose feels like he's in the middle of a fight, which I really like. A fight that he is leading a squad in. It almost looks like he's part of like a shield wall formation. This guy was released in 2013 and is, of course, Forge World resin, or was. He's no longer available for sale. And he's a model that I'd like to see get a, not even a huge update. I'd just like to see him move to plastic. And, just maybe updated just a little bit in terms of scale. Definitely a really cool model I'd like to get my hands on at some point. Next on, we're moving on to a model I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with at number 4. We have the Captain from Indomitus with the Storm Shield. This is a fantastic model that I'm sure a lot of you all have and love dearly. Obviously, Indomitus was the best-selling Warhammer box ever at the time it came out, so this guy is a very iconic mini at this point. I think the pose is really great. I like that he comes with a few different head options, which is always a nice touch. He has his helmet with the visor up, visor down, and helmet off completely. I do also like that his base can have either a Necron on it, or you can build him without the Necron on it. It's always nice to have those contextual bits be optional. This guy was released in 2020 in plastic, and of course, he's mainly in Indomitus and the starter sets for 9th edition, though he is sold independently now. This is a model that I quite like, and I definitely wouldn't mind getting an extra copy of to paint him up, as I did, of course, paint him very early in my journey in the hobby, as I'm sure many of my fellow hobbyists did. Overall, a very, very good captain, especially, for what he was. Next up, we have Torgaradon at number 3, a personal and very recent favorite of mine. I love the pose, the bulkiness of the armor, the giant power fist. Everything about Torgaradon is very cool. And I think that he just, out of those range of characters released for the different chapters for Primaris update, I think Torgaradon is my favorite. I also really like the shoulder-mounted grav cannon, or grav gun. This guy was released in 2019, and he is in plastic. He is, of course, sold. He doesn't have too many options, but he is a great kit to convert out of. In fact, I've seen quite a few cool Pedro Cantors made out of this guy. And it just makes me want to see a new Pedro Cantor. Maybe he would wear Gravis armor with maybe double bolt storms or something like that. But now we're getting sidetracked. Torgaradon, though, absolutely fabulous model. And I can't wait to get him. Next up, we have a throwback to earlier. We have the Primaris version of Captain Centos. I feel like this is just a really, really cool update of the classic Centos sort of design. This was a limited release for stores, for store anniversaries in 2017. Plasma pistol's looking sharp. I love how flowy the cape is. The pose is, of course, great as always. This guy feels very much like the essence of a Space Marine captain made manifest. The pose is cool, his silhouette is very recognizable, and he would easily be able to be picked out of a squad. He has the right level of ornate armor with still keeping the classic Space Marine hallmark designs. Tilting plate, of course. This is just a fantastic, fantastic model that I desperately want to get my hands on, though being a limited edition model that apparently a lot of people really like, unsurprisingly, he costs a lot of money on the secondhand market. So getting him will have to be a very special occasion, that is for sure. And moving on to number 1, for my longtime viewers, this probably won't surprise any of you, but we are jumping back to the Dark Angels with, of course, Supreme Grandmaster Azrael. Now, I have a very personal history with Grandmaster Azrael here. Back when I was just a little 3-year-old kid, he was the first mini I ever saw. My brother was painting him, and he was just awesome. Obviously, that's when I fell in love with the hobby. I do love that metal model. In fact, I have him. He's sitting in my closet right now. But I think the plastic version is in a lot of ways just a direct upgrade. He can wear his helmet, his gun makes more sense, while I do miss that completely nonsensical version of his old gun. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's hilarious. The pose is just a lot more dramatic, and of course, as I mentioned, he can wear his helmet. I love this model. I think he's just one of the greatest Warhammer models ever across Fantasy, Sigmar, 40k, Kill Team, whatever it may be. Fantastic model and a personal favorite of mine and a favorite character of mine. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, this list is totally subject to change, depending on the whims of the moment. If you think I ranked anything too high or too low or missed anyone, let me know down below and tell me your own rankings, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.